Hello and welcome to Game and Read. We are here to wrap up our very stretched out discussion on Resident Evil, the HD remaster we've been playing on the PS4, and the book Feed by Mira Grant.
So we have a part one of our video series where we talk about the setting of both of the book and the game. So if you haven't watched that, go check it out. It gives a little more context to what we're going to be talking about today.
And before that, we had an introduction video just setting up what the game was and what the book was. So you can check that out as well if you're very curious.
So in this video, we are doing a big old spoiler alert. Spoilers!
It's a very quiet alarm. Because you don't want to be spoiled that there are spoilers coming.
So we are going to be talking about the plot of Resident Evil and Feed, and that means we're talking about what happens, the twists, the turns, the crazy what. So if you have any interest in reading Feed or playing Resident Evil and you...
Without the answers of what happens.
Without the spoilers, stop watching now and come back and watch this video once you've consumed the media you'd like to consume.
We'll be waiting right here. So, kicking off our discussion of plot, one of the main things we found in common with these two works is really the presence of an overarching conspiracy plaguing the main characters as they go. And within that conspiracy, there being a betrayal from a close person who you assumed was on their side. I guess it's not a betrayal if they're not on your side to begin with. So, redundancies. Now, in Feed, that takes place with Sean and Georgia. They are following this presidential campaign. And somewhere along the way, they get attacked on a road sign. There are attacks happening at different stops on the campaign trail. And finally, it results in the death of their close friend and video editor and a poet on their blog named Buffy. And she reveals as she is slowly turning into a zombie, because that's how a lot of people die in this book, that she had been channeling information to somebody. She didn't even seem to know who. She was, concerned about who they were following and what they were doing. And so she had been funneling information to this group that had been basically attacking this political campaign and being responsible for dozens of deaths.
Whoever she was funneling it to was malicious and was trying to take out many, many people, very intentionally.
Yes, and we find out at the end of this book that one of the people within this particular conspiracy is the running mate of Senator Ryman, which is Governor Tate, who is a more hard line on, I guess, religious conservatism and conservatism in general. He wants to actively go to war with zombies instead of more containment methods.
His idea is to use zombies as a way to guide the nation back to a more religious life, right? So that's the whole, he's really motivated by this religious kind of, we've got to take our country back, and he wants to use zombies. He wants to make zombies the nemesis in which, the country unites in a very faith-based Christian way.
Yes, he is inciting terrorist-type attacks in order to, forward his own political agenda. However, he is found out and dealt with. But yeah, that was definitely a bit of a twist, although not super surprising considering he was definitely a vocal antagonist, if not a physical one, for a decent chunk of the book. And so that's what happens in Feed. Now, in Resident Evil, in case you didn't know, and from this 18-year-old pretty popular game, the STARS Special Forces Police Corps group, they are betrayed and actively being taken out by one of their commanders, Albert Wesker.
He looks like a terrible person, by the way.
Yes, he's like a weird buff-looking nerd.
With uber cool sunglasses.
Yeah, it's like sunglasses that also just look like regular glasses, like they're transition lenses. And he looks like a glasses model, but then he's in a bulletproof vest, so it's a little weird. But anyway, that's not why he's evil. He's evil, and then they designed him. He was working for the Umbrella Company Corporation, which were the people responsible for creating these zombie viruses in this lab in this spooky haunted house, of course. He was working with them as a consultant and then I guess became some sort of weird zombie zealot in his own way, because he was convinced he should release this zombie called the Tyrant, and that was for some reason a good thing. He didn't really explain himself on that, so I'm a little confused by that mention, but I really don't get what he was trying to go with it. But he was a close ally, at least in the story, and then ends up coming around and pretty much almost killing the main characters, a lot of side characters.
Depending on what ending you have or what path you go, of which there are 6, just FYI.
6-ish.
6-ish. He definitely is responsible for more than a few deaths in the mansion. I mean, you find out, he's trying to take out Star Force? Just
Stars.
Stars.
It's an acronym.
He is trying to take out Stars as part of the Umbrella Corporation, but he also alludes to some, outside of Umbrella Corporation nutty madness motivation.
So that is definitely a bit of a twist. Especially, it was a little odd because you really don't see Wesker at all for most, he's there right at the beginning, disappears, you don't really know anything about him until the very end then. So, he is not a very active antagonist in the limelight. You can kind of see that he's probably doing some stuff in the shadows by the time you get to the end. But it didn't feel like as much of a betrayal, because it was kind of like, what? This guy's evil? No, I don't know who he is.
One thing that I thought was really nice in both the book and the game is that there are clues to who is behind these conspiracies, but they're the kind of clues that don't seem to be that significant or really make much sense until you get further into it. So there are definitely parts in Resident Evil where as you read the diary pieces or see, paintings or encounter rooms, you are learning more and more about what is going on. And there is finally I think a diary entry where Wesker's name is dropped. And that's sort of the first kind of, concrete, oh wait, we recognize that name. Computer file.
Yeah.
It was some, but it was pretty far in.
Yeah.
But then you look back and you go, oh yeah, there are all these clues that make sense now that we know what's going on. And there was a similar setup in Feed, as where there's all these things that are happening and there are clues along the way, but it's not until later that they really kind of form to make sense.
Well, and really, I think the connecting thread in Feed for this conspiracy is this sort of conservative American Christian identity. Buffy, their friend who betrayed them and also died, was a fairly conservative Christian. I think she was conservative, French Catholic, they mentioned. And Tate, Governor Tate, was also a very hard Christian morals type guy. And I think they being Myra Grant, created this thread where it's kind of like, okay, it's this kind of back conspiracy from these very hard right Christian groups in the zombified America. So I think that was kind of the line she was drawing there. And Buffy, even when she was dying, explained that, she thought what they were doing following the campaign wasn't God's will. That's why she started working against them. However, she ended up regretting it as she almost got her friends killed and then got herself killed as well. So she definitely came around on, thinking what was right and what was wrong on that end.
Another interesting aspect of both Feed and Resident Evil is that zombies were a product of biomedical tinkering.
Yes, they're both disease-based, where in Resident Evil it's the TNG virus, and in Feed it's the Kellis-Amberley virus. And they were both really brought about in weird experiments.
So in Resident Evil, the T and G viruses are really targeted at bioweapons. So zombies are created, that whole experiment is happening to create bioweapons.
Frankenstein monster-y type stuff where they're just big hulking dudes, I guess, to take out armies.
And they experiment on people and they experiment on plants and animals, and it's very geared at this very violent weapon. Like, it was an intentional virus creation. What can we do to kind of cause havoc? Whereas in Feed, the Kellis-Amberley virus is a product of a cure for cancer and for the common cold and for all these diseases that are terrible and kill people. And it was an accidental release. And no one knew that this combination was going to cause people to turn into zombies. So it's really interesting that both zombie concepts come from viral infection, and yet their genesis is so different, and the motivation behind them is also very different.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, I'm going to get slightly off topic here, just with like, I feel like the more prevalent zombie universe is nowadays are all very much virus-based, where it spreads from live host to live host. Whereas, like, I remember growing up, like, zombies are like dead who then rise, like out of graves and stuff, but that's not really the case with most of these. It's like you get infected when you're alive, you either transform during that time, or when you die it becomes active and then you turn into that. I don't know, I just feel like zombie lore can get so inconsistent between universes. Now, the last real thing we wanted to talk about in how these two sources come together in their plot is the perspective shift. And in the game, it's a pretty, one way or the other perspective shift. At the beginning of the game, you say, I'm going to play as Jill, or I'm going to play as Chris. And they both have different things that happen to them along the way. Different characters will pop out, different conversations will happen, different items appear in different places. And really, Resident Evil was meant to be played numerous times by the same person. And, well, I don't think I could do that because I can't keep replaying that game.
Disclaimer, we didn't finish the whole game because we don't have the stamina to be that anxious for that long watching things pop out at you. But we watched all the cutscenes.
Yeah, we have done our research as to what the story is. I guess we should have said this at the beginning. However, we both are really bad at horror stuff, and so the whole reason this is coming out so late is because we could not play this because we got scared too many times. We read all the book.
We did do that. But yes, the Resident Evil is designed to be played multiple times by the same person using the different perspectives.
So you get the different perspective between Jill and Chris. You can also make different decisions that will give you slight variations in ending and certain scenes along the way. There's one point where you could get medicine to one of these guys who died from a previous STARS team, and if you do, he will come in and help you during a boss fight. If you don't get it to him in time, he just dies and becomes a zombie. There are different things that'll pop up like that, and if you play it a bunch of times, you'll get all the different perspectives. You can't really have a playthrough with everything because they're contradictory. Mm-hmm. Whereas in Feed, there is a perspective shift when the main character, Georgia Mason, is killed. We said spoilers. You came in here at your own risk. So, very close to the end of the book, Georgia is hit with a dart after having figured out the whole plot that Governor Tate is behind this whole attack on the Ryman campaign. She is hit with a dart which has a syringe with the Kellis-Amberley virus. She starts mutating. She's able to put out one last blog post really just saying everything that happened and all that. And then her brother Sean, who's been with her the entire time, has to put her down for, because she's turning into a zombie. And at that time, it goes from a strict all Georgia perspective, everything is narrated by her, to all Sean. And it's really kind of jarring how different it feels, where I feel like if you read the whole book just from Sean's perspective, it would be very distinctly different, and just how much of the storytelling was from Georgia's voice, whereas the last chunk is just from Sean's voice, and it feels miles different.
Well, and Mira Grant, this forced shift in perspective, coming at it from a different angle, does not end with the last couple chapters of Feed. After she completed the Newsflesh trilogy, Mira Grant actually went back and rewrote the first book, Feed. It's called Feedback. And it is from the perspective of a totally different team of reporters. And it's the same timeline, it's the same world.
So it's more revisited.
Revisiting, not
Spun
rewriting.
off.
Spin off. So, but it's the same world. And this team of reporters you're following in Feedback is covering a Democratic candidate. And the Masons are kind of peppered in different ways, but it is a totally different experience. And it's fantastic. It's very cool to see how Mira Grant imagines this world from different perspectives and different kinds of characters, and how she's able to tell this story that we read once in a totally new way. And I was super enthralled with the whole thing. So I think the shift perspective really works for this kind of material. I mean, zombies have gotten kind of cliche in a lot of ways. And so with, I think, both Resident Evil and Feed having different perspectives available to you makes things a little more interesting.
Well, and I feel like so many, now that I think about it, so many zombie films and pieces of zombie media are from multiple perspectives. Like, think of The Walking Dead, how many characters are in that ensemble cast. Even think back to Night of the Living Dead, there are like 8 different people stuck in this house and they all have their different things going on. And yeah, I feel like it's rare that you see a zombie thing about like a singular survivor. It's always about a team of them and everything kind of going on with that and their own perspectives, ideally. So really, I mean, I guess it's not that crazy that these two pieces have multiple perspectives, as it might actually be a fairly common trend in at least some of the more popular zombie representation out there. And I guess the last thing we have to talk about is whether or not we consider this to be a good pairing. Aaron, what's your thought on that?
I must say yes.
I'm going to agree.
I think that, I mean, the whole zombie survival story kind of fits naturally together. I mean, they're both zombie survival stories. But deeper than that, as we've talked about in this video and our last video, there are really a lot of nice similarities and parallels and complementary aspects in both setting and plot, while also both being sort of a unique take on what is the zombie story.
They're not samey at all. Like, if I were to actually just put them together, they feel very different, but then you can find these fun links where it's like, oh yeah, they actually have a lot of things in common where, if you have played Resident Evil, I would recommend reading Feed. I think it's a fun take on zombies. I mean, I guess if you're just in it for jump scares, Feed's not really about that.
Resident Evil is. Feed is not.
Yeah, well, that's kind of where, like, when we were watching Resident Evil, it was a lot less scary than when you're controlling it and you have to, like, control things. But that's just kind of how it goes. So I think they fit really well together without being mirror images of each other.
I also want to throw in a recommendation for The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey.
They're always talking about that.
I know. It's another unique zombie novel. And if you are interested in more non-traditional zombie stories, go check that one out.
What's a non-traditional zombie story?
I don't know, but this is our zombie time. So, Girl with All the Gifts, M.R. Carey. Read it!
So I think that's all we have for you this video. You can find all of our posts, videos, podcasts, everything we do on GameAndRead.com.
You can also follow us on social media. We are on Twitter, Instagram, and Litzy at Game and Read.
Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time.